In the skeletal muscular system, you've got three different types of muscles. Skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, cardiac muscles. Skeletal muscles are striated, voluntary, and multinucleated. Red fibers are slow twitch and they're high in myoglobin, and white fibers are the fast twitch, low in myoglobin. So myoglobin actually has more affinity for oxygen than hemoglobin does, and because these are low in myoglobin, they're not gonna be able to use aerobic processes. So you have to use glycolysis fermentation. This is where you have sprinting. This is why you feel cramped when you use your fast twitch white fibers. Smooth muscle are involuntary, usually found in the digestive, respiratory, and excretory system. There's no striations in there, and myogenic activity means contractions without the nervous system. Cardiac muscle is involuntary, it's striated, and it maintains its own rhythm. You have the SA node, the AV node, the His bundle, and Purkinje fibers. So this is a little chart right here which summarizes all the muscles. All of them will use calcium for contractions. Skeletal muscles will have many nuclei for the cells, and then somatic innervation, and skeletal muscles are voluntary. Smooth muscles are the only muscles that are not striated. The muscle cells, you've got thick and thin filaments. I-band is the thin filaments, H-zone is the thick filaments, and the H-zone is the thick filaments, and A-band never shortens. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is like the muscle cells version of the endoplasmic reticulum, but it has a high calcium concentration, which makes sense because the muscles use calcium for action potential and releasing neurotransmitters to the synaptic cleft. Muscular contractions. So the signal will travel down, and acetylcholine will release, and then calcium will release. Calcium changes the tropomyosin shape, exposing myosin to the actin. And then ATP binding will release myosin and actin, and the whole process of ATP hydrolyzation and ATP binding will be the power stroke for the actin sliding on the myosin. This is a sliding filament theory chart right here. And then in the skeletal system, you've got the axial skeleton, which is in the midline of the body, appendicular, which is the limbs in the body. Periostriatum actually is a fiber sheet around the bones, which is for protection and help muscle attachment. Tendon attaches muscles to the bone, and ligaments ligate or join bone to bone. Bone structures. So Volkmann canals contain blood vessels and fibers to maintain health of the bone. Volkmann canals are very important because you need to constantly replenish the nutrients in the bone, and on top of that, the bones have sensor. If you break a bone, you'll feel it. Lacunae hold the mature bone cells called osteocytes. Canaliculi are tiny channels for exchange of nutrients and waste. So you're gonna have to obviously get rid of waste for the cells at the cell level of the bones. Bone remodeling is constant turnover. It's basically kind of analogy is building a house over and over again to make sure it's all right. Osteoblasts build the bone, and the osteoclasts are like macrophages in the bone and resorb bone. Resorption basically means breakdown and reabsorption of the raw molecules in order to build up bone again. There are multiple hormones in the bone remodeling process. So parathyroid hormone actually promotes the absorption of bone, and calcitonin promotes bone formation. It lowers the blood calcium levels by using up the calcium in the blood. Ligaments are fibrous tissues that connect bones to one another. Synovial fluid lubricate the joints. The flexors decrease the angle. Flexing is like taking the bicep and flexing it, decreasing the angle, and then extensors are like the triceps, which increase the angle to make it straight. Adductors move parts of the body to the midline, and abductors is moving limbs away from the midline. Abductors is like away. Right here is a picture from Kaplan which shows the different hormones. So parathyroid hormones released by the parathyroid glands in response to low blood calcium. So low blood calcium will trigger the release of parathyroid, which promotes the resorption of bone, increasing calcium and phosphate in the blood. And then the calcitonin will decrease the amount of calcium it'll tone down the calcium levels in order to build the bone. Osteoblasts will do the building. Osteoclasts will do the dissolving the bone, releasing calcium into the bloodstream. This is the mnemonic. And here we go. A long bone diagram. So on the bone, you've got the ends, and the ends are epiphyses. And then in between, at this little small section right here, you've got the metaphysis and then the diaphysis right here. The diaphysis is the really long portion. Inside the blood, you've got, or inside the bone, you've got the red marrow, which will produce the red blood cells. And then inside the bone, you also have production of, you have fat. So right here are the key ideas from the skeletal muscular chapter. So A band does not change during muscle contraction because it is the entire length of the myosin filament. And because everything slides over, the A band remains the constant length. The whole process of calcium and acetylcholine. So acetylcholine will be released, which activates the acetylcholine receptors in the sarcolemma. You have depolarization and then release of calcium, which will bind calcium to the troponin, which will cause a conformational shift in the tropomyosin, and then myosin binding sites will be exposed to actin. ATP binding allows for myosin to disconnect from actin. And in the bone, the trabeculae is the site of bone marrow production. And the three parts of a bone are diaphysis, metaphysis, and epiphysis.